For more of this kind of content, you can subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment. Every morning at exactly 7:23 a.m., Emma watched through the window of Brew and Pages as the same man walked past her coffee shop. He wore a different colored scarf each day. Mondays, deep blue. Tuesdays, forest green. Wednesdays, warm burgundy. And always carried a worn leather messenger bag that looked like it held stories of its own. Emma had owned the little coffee shop for 3 years, nestled between a used bookstore and a flower shop on Maple Street. She knew most of her regular customers by name and coffee order, but the scarf man remained a mystery. He never came in, just walked past with purposeful steps and a slight smile, as if he carried a secret that made the morning brighter. "You're staring again," teased Marcus, her part-time barista and full-time matchmaker. "Just invite him in." Put up a sign that says free coffee for handsome strangers in colorful scarves. Emma laughed, wiping down the espresso machine for the 3rd time that morning. I don't even know if he drinks coffee. Maybe he's a tea person, or one of those people who only drinks green smoothies. "Only one way to find out," Marcus said, but Emma had already turned away, busying herself with arranging the pastry display. The truth was, Emma had become invested in the mystery. In a world where everything was instantly knowable with a quick internet search, there was something magical about wondering. She'd created an entire story around him. He was a professor at the nearby university, maybe teaching literature or art history. The messenger bag contained student papers and a thermos of tea. He lived in one of the old Victorian houses near campus, with a cat named Fitzgerald, and shelves lined with first edition novels. At 7:24 a.m., he appeared right on schedule. Today's scarf was a soft gray wool that complemented his dark hair. But something was different. Instead of his usual purposeful stride, he walked slowly, almost hesitantly, and instead of passing by, he stopped directly in front of her shop. Emma's heart did something acrobatic as he stood there, seeming to have an internal debate. She pretended to organize the coffee bean display while stealing glances through the window. Marcus had conveniently disappeared into the back room, probably to give her space to panic privately. The door chime rang, and suddenly he was inside her shop, bringing with him the crisp October air and the faint scent of cedar. Up close, Emma could see that his messenger bag was indeed well loved, with small patches carefully sewn over worn spots. His eyes were the warm brown of coffee beans, and his smile was nervous but genuine. "Hi," he said, and his voice had a slight rasp that suggested he hadn't spoken to anyone yet that morning. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I've been walking past your shop every day for months, and I finally worked up the courage to come in." Emma felt her cheeks warm. "You're not bothering me at all. I've noticed you walking by. The scarves are beautiful." He looked down at the gray wool around his neck and smiled. "My grandmother knits them. She insists I need a different color for each day of the week. Says it keeps life interesting." He paused, seeming to gather courage. "I'm Oliver, by the way. Oliver Chen. Emma Rodriguez. And your grandmother sounds wonderful." "She is. She also makes the best apple cinnamon bread in 3 counties, though she'd probably argue it's the best in the world." Oliver shifted his weight slightly. "I was wondering, do you happen to serve that here? Apple cinnamon bread? I've been trying to find something that reminds me of hers since she moved to the senior center." Emma's heart melted a little. "I don't, but I know someone who might be able to help with that." Oliver became a regular customer overnight, arriving each morning at 7:25 a.m. for a medium coffee with just a splash of cream and whatever pastry Emma recommended. Their conversations started brief, comments about the weather, the busy morning rush, the changing leaves outside, but gradually grew longer and more personal. Emma learned that Oliver was indeed a professor, teaching creative writing at the local college. The messenger bag contained student stories that he read with the same careful attention most people reserved for love letters. He lived alone in a small apartment above the bookstore next door, with a cat named Kerouac, who had strong opinions about his writing schedule. Close on the cat name. Emma had laughed when he told her. "I guessed Fitzgerald." "Good guess, but Kerouac seemed more appropriate for a cat who wanders in at 3 a.m. and demands food while I'm trying to work." In return, Emma shared stories about the coffee shop, how she'd inherited it from her Aunt Rosa, who believed that the perfect cup of coffee could solve most of life's problems, how she'd learned to read people by their coffee orders, how she'd been trying, for months, to recreate her grandmother's tres leches cake recipe, but couldn't quite get the texture right. "Maybe it's not about the recipe," Oliver suggested one Thursday morning as rain drummed against the windows. "Maybe it's about the memories attached to it. Some things can't be replicated, only honored." Emma looked at him over the steaming coffee cup, struck by the gentleness in his observation. Is that the writer in you talking, or the grandson missing his grandmother's apple bread? Both, Oliver admitted. I've been thinking about what makes something irreplaceable. It's not just the ingredients or the technique. It's the hands that made it, the love that went into it, the moment when you first tasted it. That afternoon, Emma found herself standing in her kitchen above the shop, staring at her grandmother's tres leches recipe card, worn soft from years of use. Instead of trying to make it exactly the same, what if she made it her own? What if she honored the memory while creating something new? The next morning, Oliver arrived to find a small plate waiting at his usual table, a slice of what Emma had decided to call Rosa's dream cake, her grandmother's tres leches recipe, enhanced with coffee and a hint of cinnamon. Oliver took a careful bite, closed his eyes, and smiled. This is perfect. It tastes like this, like a warm hug on a cold morning. My grandmother always said food was just another way of saying, I care about you, Emma said, sitting down across from him with her own cup of coffee. She sounds like she would have gotten along well with my grandmother, Oliver said. She used to say that knitting scarves was her way of wrapping people in love, even when she couldn't be there to hug them herself. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sharing the cake and the quiet morning light filtering through the shop windows. Emma realized she was no longer curious about Oliver's story because she was living it with him, one conversation at a time. Emma, Oliver said softly, would you maybe like to have dinner sometime? Somewhere that doesn't smell like espresso and where you're not working? Emma's smile felt like sunrise. I'd love that, but I have one condition. Anything. Wear the blue scarf. It's my favorite. Oliver's laugh was warm and genuine. Deal. Though I should warn you, my grandmother is going to want to meet you eventually. She's been asking why I'm suddenly so cheerful in the mornings. I look forward to it, Emma said, and meant it completely. 2 weeks later, Emma found herself standing outside Sunset Manor Senior Living, holding a carefully packed box of Rosa's dream cakes and fighting a case of nerves that rivaled her first day opening the coffee shop. Oliver squeezed her hand reassuringly. She's going to love you, he said. I told her about the cake, and she's been planning this meeting like a diplomatic summit. What if she doesn't approve of me? Emma asked. What if she thinks I'm not good enough for her grandson, who teaches young minds and writes beautiful stories? Oliver stopped walking and turned to face her. Emma, you get up at 5 every morning to create a space where people feel welcome and cared for. You remember everyone's names and their stories. You made a cake that tastes like love because you wanted to share something meaningful with me. My grandmother is going to take one look at you and wonder why I waited so long to bring you home. Grandmother Chen was a tiny woman with silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun, and eyes that sparkled with the same warmth as Oliver's. She sat in her favorite chair by the window, wearing a hand-knitted cardigan in soft lavender, and welcomed Emma with a smile that immediately put her at ease. So you're the coffee shop girl who's been making my Oliver smile like a schoolboy, she said, reaching out to take Emma's hands. I'm Margaret, though Oliver tells me you've been calling me Grandmother Chen in your head for weeks. Emma blushed. He told you that? Writers are terrible at keeping secrets, dear, especially when they're in love. Margaret's eyes twinkled as Oliver's face turned red. Now let me see this famous cake that's been the subject of so many phone calls. Emma opened the box with trembling hands, revealing 3 perfect slices of Rosa's dream cake, each garnished with a delicate coffee bean design she'd piped in chocolate. Margaret took a careful bite, chewed thoughtfully, and closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were bright with unshed tears. Oh, my dear girl, this tastes like every beautiful morning I've ever had. Like every moment when I felt truly grateful to be alive. My grandmother used to say that good food was a way of sharing happiness, Emma said softly. Wise woman, Margaret agreed. I can taste her love in this cake, and yours too. The coffee and cinnamon. It's like you took a cherished memory and gave it new life. They spent the afternoon sharing stories. Margaret told Emma about teaching Oliver to knit when he was 7. He was terrible at it, but so determined. And about her late husband, who used to write her love poems on coffee shop napkins. Emma shared memories of Aunt Rosa teaching her to make perfect espresso, and how the coffee shop had become her way of carrying on her family's tradition of hospitality. I have something for you, Margaret said, as their visit was coming to an end. She pulled out a soft bundle wrapped in tissue paper. I finished this last week. Emma unwrapped it carefully to reveal a scarf in deep emerald green, so soft it felt like holding a cloud. The pattern was intricate, clearly the work of someone with decades of experience and infinite patience. I can't accept this, Emma said, though she was already imagining how beautiful and warm it would be. This must have taken you weeks to make. 6 weeks, Margaret confirmed. And you absolutely can accept it, because I made it specifically for you. Oliver described your eyes so often that I knew exactly what color would bring them out. Emma looked at Oliver, who was watching the exchange with obvious delight. You described my eyes to your grandmother? Among other things, Oliver admitted. I may have mentioned your laugh, the way you hum while you work. How you always remember which customers are having bad days and need extra kindness. Oh, Emma said softly, wrapping the scarf around her shoulders. It was perfect, exactly the right weight and warmth, made with the kind of care that could only come from love. Margaret reached out and patted Emma's cheek gently. Welcome to the family, dear. Now, when are you two going to make this official so I can start knitting baby blankets? Grandmother, Oliver protested, but he was laughing. Emma blushed furiously, but found herself imagining a future filled with Sunday visits, holiday dinners, and the kind of love that expressed itself in homemade scarves and perfect slices of cake shared on quiet mornings. Spring arrived early that year, painting Maple Street in soft pastels and filling Emma's coffee shop with the sweet scent of blooming flowers from the shop next door. Emma and Oliver had settled into a rhythm, as natural as breathing. Morning coffee and conversation, evening walks through the neighborhood, quiet weekends reading together in the little garden behind the shop. Oliver had become such a fixture at Bruin Page's that regular customers asked after him if he was running late. Mrs. Patterson, who came in every Tuesday for her decaf latte, had started bringing him articles about writing contests. Young Jeremy from the bookstore next door had appointed himself Oliver's unofficial research assistant, bringing him interesting books he thought might spark story ideas. Emma told Oliver one Saturday morning as they watched Jeremy arrange a window display while wearing one of Margaret's scarves. "I think my customers love you more than they love me." "Impossible," Oliver said, kissing the top of her head. "Though Mrs. Patterson did ask me yesterday if I was planning to make an honest woman of you soon." Emma laughed. "She says that to every couple who's been together longer than 6 months. She considers herself the neighborhood matchmaker." "Maybe she has a point," Oliver said, quietly. Something in his tone made Emma look up from the espresso machine she was cleaning. Oliver was fidgeting with something in his pocket, his usual confidence replaced by the same nervous energy he'd had the first morning he came into the shop. "Oliver, everything okay?" "Actually, no," he said, taking a deep breath. "I've been carrying something around for 2 weeks, waiting for the perfect moment, and I'm starting to realize that the perfect moment isn't going to announce itself with fanfare." Emma's heart began to race as Oliver reached into his pocket and pulled out a small worn velvet box. "This was my grandmother's," he said, opening it to reveal a simple but elegant ring with a single diamond surrounded by tiny emeralds. "She gave it to me last month and told me that love like ours doesn't come along often, and when it does, you don't waste time wondering if you're ready for it." Emma's hands flew to her mouth, tears already blurring her vision. Oliver dropped to one knee right there in the middle of the coffee shop, between the espresso machine and the pastry display, surrounded by the warm scents of coffee and cinnamon that had become the backdrop of their love story. "Emma Rodriguez," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you turned my quiet morning walks into the best part of every day. You made me believe in the kind of love that shows up in small gestures and daily choices. You welcomed me into your world and somehow made it ours. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Emma whispered, then louder, "Yes, yes, absolutely yes." Oliver slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, and as he stood to kiss her, the coffee shop erupted in applause. Emma looked around in confusion to see Mrs. Patterson, Jeremy, Marcus, and at least 6 other regulars pressed against the windows, grinning and cheering. "Did you plan this?" Emma asked, laughing through her tears. "Marcus may have texted a few people," Oliver admitted. "Apparently the whole neighborhood has been waiting for this moment." Mrs. Patterson burst through the door, followed by the small crowd of well-wishers. "About time, young man. I was starting to think I'd have to propose for you." The impromptu celebration lasted until closing time, with customers buying each other coffee and sharing their own love stories. Someone had called Margaret, who arrived with tears in her eyes and a bottle of champagne she'd been saving for exactly this occasion. As the last customer left, and Marcus finished cleaning up, Emma and Oliver found themselves alone in the shop, still wearing their coffee-stained aprons, surrounded by the lingering warmth of their community's joy. "No second thoughts?" Oliver asked, spinning Emma gently around the empty shop. Emma looked at her ring, catching the late afternoon light, at the man who had transformed her quiet life into something beautiful and full, at the space where they had built something meaningful together, one conversation at a time. "Only about one thing," she said, wrapping her arms around his neck. "What's that?" "I'm wondering why we waited so long to make this official. Mrs. Patterson is never going to let us forget that she saw it coming before we did." Oliver's laugh was the sound of pure happiness. "I love you, Emma Rodriguez, soon to be Emma Chen. I love you too, Oliver Chen, maker of beautiful words and keeper of my heart." 1 year later, Emma stood in the garden behind Bruin Pages, wearing her grandmother's wedding dress, altered to fit perfectly, with Margaret's emerald scarf draped around her shoulders as her something borrowed and something blue. The ceremony was small and perfect, with folding chairs arranged between the flower beds and cafe lights strung overhead like captured stars. Oliver waited at the makeshift altar, wearing his grandfather's suit and the brand-new scarf that Margaret had knitted specifically for the occasion, deep coffee brown with gold threads that caught the late afternoon light. His eyes never left Emma's face as she walked down the aisle to the soft guitar music played by Jeremy, who had discovered a hidden musical talent along with his gift for window displays. The coffee shop had been transformed into Reception Central, with Marcus and his catering team, Emma's regular customers, who had volunteered their services, serving Rosa's dream cake, alongside Margaret's apple cinnamon bread, and an array of international coffee drinks that represented the global community that had embraced their love story. "I can't believe you're serving coffee at your own wedding," Mrs. Patterson said as she hugged Emma during the reception. "Though I suppose it's fitting. This is where your love story began." Emma looked around at the familiar space filled with everyone she cared about. Oliver was in deep conversation with her father about the similarities between teaching and farming. Both require patience, respect for growth, and the faith that good things come to those who tend them carefully. Margaret was teaching Emma's cousin Maria how to knit, their heads bent together over yarn in soft yellow. The bookstore owner had set up a small display of love poems for guests to browse, and someone had started a tradition of writing marriage advice on coffee filter papers that would become a scrapbook for Emma and Oliver to read later. "P. Where are you two going for your honeymoon?" asked Sarah from the flower shop, who had provided all the wedding flowers in exchange for free coffee for a year. P. Emma and Oliver exchanged the kind of look that married couples develop, full of shared secrets and understanding. "P. We're taking a week off and staying right here," Oliver said. "Emma's never had a vacation from the shop, and I want to wake up every morning with nowhere to be except next to her. Plus," Emma added, "Margaret is teaching me to knit, and I want to make Oliver a scarf before winter. Something tells me I'm going to need a lot of practice." As the evening wound down and the last guests headed home, Emma and Oliver found themselves alone in the garden, swaying to music that existed only in their hearts. The coffee shop sat quiet and peaceful behind them, ready to welcome them back to work and routine and the beautiful ordinary life they had built together. "Any regrets?" Oliver asked, echoing the question from their engagement night. Emma looked at her husband, with his gentle eyes and kind smile. at the ring that had belonged to his grandmother, and now carried their promises, at the life they had created, from daily coffee orders and morning conversations. "Just one," she said, and Oliver's eyebrows rose in concern. "What's that?" "I regret not putting up a sign years ago that said, 'Free coffee for handsome strangers in colorful scarves.' We could have been having this conversation 3 years earlier." Oliver's laughter rang through the garden like a bell, and as he spun her around under the cafe lights and the stars, Emma knew that some love stories don't need dramatic gestures or grand adventures. Sometimes the most beautiful stories are written in the quiet moments, the daily choices, the simple decision to make room in your life for someone who makes ordinary mornings feel like magic. True love often arrives quietly in the form of everyday kindness and shared moments of connection. The most meaningful relationships are built not on grand gestures, but on daily choices to see, appreciate, and care for each other. Love grows best when nurtured with patience, respect, and the courage to be vulnerable with someone who values your authentic self. Sometimes the greatest adventures are found not in distant places, but in opening your heart to the person who makes even ordinary mornings feel extraordinary.